Hi guys! So it's really hot here in Kigali at the moment. We're supposed to be in the rainy season, but so far there has been remarkably little rain and it feels as hot as the middle of the hot season. So I don't know if we're having a drought or something, but it's not pleasant. So I'm trying to take my mind off it by going through my 23andMe results, because when I went back to the UK last Christmas, I indulged myself in something I wanted to do for a really long time. So I took the 23andMe DNA test to see about my ancestry. Hello everybody and welcome. I am quite excited today. I have got a 23andMe DNA testing kit. Now, this is something that I've been interested in just for a really long time. You know, when I first heard about the idea that you can get DNA tested, find out about your family history that way, connect with other people who might be related, and, you know, even going back further than that, the migratory path out of Africa, pretty much, you can find all of that out from a DNA testing kit. And that was sort of really fascinating to me, and I really wanted to do it. The other thing, the reason that I went for the 23andMe is because they do a sort of a health scan as well. And again, I was just interested. It kind of gives you risk factors for certain things, sleep patterns. You can find out just fun facts. It's not really supposed to be a medical diagnostic, but it's supposed to be fun facts, and I was up for a bit of that. I'm just really excited. It's a little box, it's a little bit pricey. It was on sale. If you hold out, they do sales, so I think I might be wrong, it's something like 120 quid if it's not on sale, but I think I paid about 75 for this. I can't remember, but it was on sale, and keep your eyes out for that. So yeah, basically it's really super simple to use. You open it up, there's a booklet. Hello, hi. And all it does is it helps you to download an app on your phone, which then talks you through the steps, but there's also written down steps for those who can't get the app. It is so incredibly simple. Basically, you scan the barcode on the back of your box, and that registers the test kit with 23andMe. And then all you need to do is to take out this bit inside, which is basically it's a spit tube, and you need to get quite a bit of spit. You need to fill it up to this line here, so you do need quite a bit of spit. I've just started spitting. I was wrong, you don't have to fill up the entire tube here. There's just like a little bit at the top here, so it's actually not too bad. It's not too bad. And also you have to refrain from eating or drinking anything for 30 minutes before you fill up the tube. So no food or drink, even water, for 30 minutes before you do this. And then you fill it up, you close this cap on top, which releases some liquid, then you screw it up and you post it off. And about, well, I'm not too sure how much later you get the results, but I will keep you updated. So I'm going to go and do some spitting, and then I will come back when I get my results back. It took a month for the results to come back. But I've waited until now to share them because I also bought one for my mum's birthday and I bought one for my dad's birthday. So now I have my mum's results and I have my dad's results. So I can kind of see what I inherited from each of them. And I can also track the haplogroups. So your haplogroup is the furthest ancestor that you can trace back to the very beginning of time. So it will be your mother's into infinity, and your father's into infinity. So basically, the furthest back that you can trace your ancestry groups on your mum's side and your dad's side. So I had to wait until my dad got his test results back, because you can only get your male or your father's haplogroup back from a a male relative. So as a female, because I've only got two X chromosomes, I can only get my mum's haplogroup from testing my own genetics. So yeah, if you're thinking about taking a DNA test, I thought I'd just show you the process and a little bit about what I learned about my own ancestry through it and what you can learn about your ancestry through it. So yeah, let's take a look.
All right, so the main point of getting your DNA analysed is to find out what your ancestry composition is. So this is, where do you come from? Where do your genetic traits mostly come from? So as you can see here, I've got very, very little variance. I am almost 100% Northwestern European, so British and Irish. And this doesn't come as any surprise at all. So in 2001, when I was about 20, I went with my mum to Ireland on a family holiday because she wanted to trace back her ancestry. So we went to the records office at County Clare and we ended up at Cracklow, County Clare, which has a cemetery where most of my mum's ancestors are buried. So this is my mum's dad's side, and it's really quite interesting. They printed out this massive report which gives us all of the members of the family, dating back to the 1800s. And it's very interesting reading, but it's also, there's a few sad things in there as well. On 22nd of April 1910, your great-grandfather, so my mother's great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, James Frost, died suddenly from heart failure at the railway station in 6 Mile Bridge. He was only 68. His occupation was listed as a caretaker. And this one I think I found particularly sad is on the 26th of November 1918, my great-great-grandmother Mary Nash Frost died at the workhouse in Ennis, and she was only 64. Her marital status was given as widow, and she died of an abdominal tumour. So it's kind of sad, sort of dropping dead at a railway station and others dying in workhouses. I always think death in a workhouse is a particularly unpleasant one, especially after having been made a widow, so she probably had quite an ordinary life until she lost her husband and any form of income, which is upsetting. So yeah, there's some really really difficult ones in there and people who died at very early ages. But there's also some long life ones in there, especially I think it was the ones who remained as farmers. So my great-great-grandfather's brother Robert Frost lived to 87 as a farmer, and another brother lived to 77 as a farmer. And my great-great-great-grandmother Bridget McNamara died at 72, and she was also a farmer's widow. And I think her husband, my great-great-great-grandfather, died at 80 as a farmer. So it does seem that having been a farmer, I suppose if it was your own holding, although it was a tough life, it did seem to give you a decent length of life for those days. Anyway, so knowing all of that about Ireland really doesn't surprise me that I am so incredibly British and Irish. It actually breaks down areas in the UK where you come from. I'm not sure what that is. Glasgow City, that's interesting. Cumbria is not a surprise because my dad is from Cumbria. He's from Carlisle, and so is my aunt, my nana, my granddad. The Yorkshire side of things is not a surprise either because I think my gran came from Yorkshire. So my great-grandmother on my mother's side, she got pregnant out of wedlock, I think in Yorkshire, and ended up migrating south, and her daughter was brought up as the daughter of another lady in a more respectable household. It's a very, very long and complicated story, but the West Midlands is where my mum comes from, so Leicester, actually a little bit more East Midlands, so Leicester is where my mum grew up. My mum is a farmer's daughter and they had a farm in Leicester, so Leicester is really a very strong link for us. Greater London confuses me because I do know, I think on my dad's side, we had some family, I think one lady was a washerwoman in London. But I kind of wonder how you separate out the genetics of London, because surely most people from everywhere in the whole country must have migrated down to London at some point. Like some of their ancestors must have ended up in London. So I wonder how London becomes a distinct genetic group, simply because London is made up of people not just from all over the UK, but from all over the world. So I don't know, it's interesting. But Ireland, this part of Ireland, definitely. Cracklow, County Clare was very strong for us. And again, Dublin is to Ireland what London is to the UK, is people from all over Ireland must have ended up at Dublin in one capacity or another. And that part of it is definitely not a surprise. So then the interesting trace elements are the Scandinavian element. But, you know, given that I'm British, having a little bit of Scandinavian in me is not really that surprising due to Vikings. And it's such a very, very trace amount. The one that really fascinates me is this bit here is almost 1% Sardinian. Fascinates me that Sardinia is its own genetic makeup just here off the coast of Italy. And when I kind of saw that, I was having all of these romantic notions, because it's somewhere between the 1830s and 1710 that the Sardinian element entered our family line. And I was sort of thinking about pirates. I was thinking about, you know, somebody getting washed up on the shores of Sardinia and falling in love and having this amazing kind of romantic kind of affair before returning to Britain. And then I started researching Sardinia. It seems that around that period in history, there was a lot of diplomatic envoys travelling between Sardinia and London and Sardinia. There was the Treaty of London in 1718, which changed Sardinia from a Spanish territory to an Italian one, or a Sicilian one. And there was even a Sardinian embassy in London. So the more that I looked into it, the more I kind of thought, oh, you know, maybe it was less about romantic pirates on the high seas and more about, I don't know, some old diplomat getting his leg over. Either a Sardinian diplomat in London or a London diplomat in Sardinia. You know, it probably boiled down to my ancestral washerwoman getting taken advantage of by some crusty old politician. So, yeah, a little bit less romantic than I was hoping for. But who knows? You know, it's ancient history and no evidence remains. So we shall never know how that Sardinian ancestry came to be. So the very last part of my ancestry is unassigned, which sounds wonderfully mysterious to me. And it just basically says that part of my DNA hasn't been matched to a region yet. And that could be because it happened so far back in history that the strands have just been too tangled up to unravel. Or maybe it could be that there haven't been enough samples taken from every part of the world yet to be able to identify and distinguish that part. So that's really interesting. And another part that I like is that you can quite clearly see which parts you inherited from which parent. So the British and Irish side is pretty evenly matched between my mum and my dad, whereas the Scandinavian trace seems to come from my mum's side, which I can believe because my mum has blue eyes, and blue eyes are apparently a genetic mutation that first happened around 10,000 years ago, and they're most prevalent in Scandinavian people. So it would make more sense that my mum and my mum's side, who do tend to have grey blue eyes, is more likely to be the Scandinavian side than my dad, whose family mostly have hazel green eyes. And the interesting part is that the Sardinian part seems to come from my dad. So there might have been some explorers or some politicians long ago on my dad's side, as does the unassigned part. So there's a little bit of a mystery in us there, but it's so trace that it probably doesn't have much influence over, I don't know, our personality or our health or other parts of us. So it's very interesting, although I find this a bit confusing. Because they're my parents and we're connected on 23andMe, I can go and look at their full reports. So this is my dad's full genetic report. And what I find really interesting here is that there doesn't appear to be any suggestion of Sardinia in there. He's got a tiny bit of Scandinavia. He's got quite a large amount of French and German, which I don't appear to have inherited at all from his side. And he also has a little bit of North Africa and broadly West Asian, Northern African, but very, very trace amounts. But I haven't seemed to inherited that either. But I can't see specifically anything in there saying Sardinia. And again, when I look at my mum, she comes up as 100% British and Irish. And there's no suggestion of the Scandinavian part of her in that. Although when I look at which parts I've inherited from them, it clearly states that she's the Scandinavian side, my dad is the Sardinian side. So I guess maybe that's trace elements of DNA skipping generations. Whilst studying all of this, I learned about epigenetics. And epigenetics, if you haven't heard about it, is absolutely fascinating. Do go and Wikipedia that, go and look that up. Because epigenetics is the idea that your environment and your experiences in the world can turn on and off certain genetic traits. That's my understanding of epigenetics, but it is an absolutely fascinating thing to go and look up if you're interested in genetics. So just to finish up, I'm going to take a quick look at my Auntie Jean's report. So my Auntie Jean is my dad's sister, and you can see here that she also shares the French and German ancestry with my dad, which I don't. And she's also got the North African part that my dad got, and part of the Levantine, which didn't show up in my report or my dad's report. So that's quite interesting how, you know, two siblings with the same parents, like a couple of years age difference, can end up with still slightly different genetic makeup. And it would just be fascinating to one day know how much that influences us in terms of our emotional responses, in terms of our personalities, in terms of our preferences and our health. How much can such a small difference make to us, and how much of that is genetic and how much of that is environmental? It's a really fascinating question. Okay, so this page is kind of good fun. It's fun facts about yourself related to how much Neanderthal DNA you've inherited. So according to this, I have a very low percentage of Neanderthal DNA, so less than 2%. But Neanderthal DNA is apparently associated with certain traits. So these are the fun facts, and I just wanted to run through quickly and see how accurate it is. So the first fact is you have one variant associated with having difficulty discarding rarely used possessions. I wouldn't say so much as an adult now, but definitely as a child, I formed extreme emotional attachments to inanimate objects, and I had a lot of trouble throwing things away, even if I didn't use them. I've kind of got over that a bit in my my later years, but I do think that that's something that's just very common to children in general. I might be wrong, but I think, you know, as human beings and as children, we do form attachments to possessions quite strongly anyway. You have one variant associated with having a worse sense of direction. I'd actually go further than that. I would say I have got no sense of direction whatsoever. At university, I had a friend called Sam, and you could spin her around on the spot, and she could stop pointing dead north every time. It was creepy weird, and a lot of fun to test. But I can't even find north with a bloody compass. I am useless at direction. So another one is being less likely to have a fear of heights. That's spot on. I have no fear of heights, really. Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I wouldn't go and stand on the edge of a ledge on the Grand Canyon, but I don't really get vertigo or anything like that. But then this all seems a little bit contradictory, because when I look at my normal traits, so not specifically from my Neanderthal DNA, but from my general DNA, which is the majority of my DNA, when we look at fear of heights, it says that I'm more likely than average to suffer from a fear of heights. It also says that about my Auntie Jean, and it's actually true for my Auntie Jean. She really doesn't like heights, whereas I don't have any problem with them. So I've definitely noticed a disparity between my normal genetic traits and the ones that are reported in my Neanderthal traits. So being less likely to prefer salty foods over sweet, again, absolutely true. I prefer sweet foods. I have a very sweet tooth. I mean, I like savory as well, don't get me wrong, but given the choice between a chocolate brownie and, I don't know, a bowl of noodles, I'd probably go for the chocolate brownie. Being more likely to sweat during a workout, again, absolutely true. I used to hate gym class in school because I sweat. I go red very quickly and I sweat profusely. And I used to feel very, very self-conscious about that. So, yep, that's absolutely true. And eating leafy greens less frequently. Maybe is I don't know. That's a difficult one. I feel like that's a socially situational one because, I was brought up vegetarian as a child, so I ate a lot of vegetables. I must admit, I'm not a massive fan of salad. I don't find myself craving salad. So all of the others here, I don't really have any variants for, but let's just check them anyway. Experiencing more itchy mosquito bites. I'm not sure how you'd test that because how would I know if my bites are more itchy than somebody else's? I could only really go on anecdotal evidence. There are a lot of mosquitoes in Rwanda, and sometimes I get bitten to buggery and it really itches, so I don't know. Generally, not feeling angry when hungry. Actually, even though I have no variants for that, I don't generally get overly angry because I'm hungry. I tend to get overly angry because I'm tired and I haven't had enough sleep. Being more likely to have an apple body shape than a pear body shape. I've never understood the body shape compared to fruit issue. I've looked it up online. I've looked at the pictures. I don't know what my body shape is. I can't easily compare it to a fruit. So I don't know. No variants associated with being more likely to prefer dark chocolate over milk chocolate. That makes sense. I am a milk chocolate girl all the way. Not so hot on white chocolate, but milk chocolate over dark chocolate any day. But that ties in a bit, I guess, with my preference for sweet foods over savoury. So anyway, it's just an interesting one. I'm not sure how many variants make a difference. But yeah, it's just fun facts. And to be honest, most of that's fairly accurate. So yeah. So just the last thing that I wanted to look at on the ancestry side of it is this part about the haplogroups, which I mentioned. And I just found this delightful, is my mother's haplogroup, so the furthest back female ancestor on my mum's side, so my mum's ancestor, left Africa between 150 and 200,000 years ago. And what I just find fascinating is that it's not just East Africa, that appears to be where I live today. that looks like Rwanda to me. That looks like the Great Lakes region of East Africa. And what's also entertaining is that my dad is exactly the same. So my great 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 blah 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 grandfather left a little bit earlier, around 275,000 years ago. And again, East Africa. Both started out around 200,000 years ago in the region of the world that I now live today. And the other part that I found personally quite interesting is this little dot and region here. So the movement cycle between East Africa, the Horn of Africa, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. Which you can also see here on Dad's side is like a movement out through the Horn of Africa and back in again through the north of Africa. Because if you remember my video on Imigongo and how Imigongo artwork came to be in Rwanda, you will have heard me deliberating long and hard as to whether or not there were migratory routes between Mesopotamia and West Africa and East Africa. And looking at these haplogroups from as far back as 200,000 years ago, 76,000 years ago, 65,000 years ago, there clearly were two distinct migratory patterns from Mesopotamia into and out of Africa, which makes my Imigongo query seem even more interesting and likely. And really, just the last thing I was going to show you is the family tree. This is the only part I found a bit disappointing about the whole thing, because you can set up a family tree builder on here. I mean, you can link in to people that you contact through 23andMe, like you might share genetic traits with people as like second or third or fourth cousins, and you can choose whether to add them to your tree or not if you can find the link between you. That's quite useful. But I was hoping that I could include all the information that I have in my Irish family report, so I know the names of all of my aunts, my uncles, going back several generations on that side, and I wanted to build a family tree around them. So I tried to do that, but the software is just, it's too difficult. Like, you do not know what complicated is until you've tried to enter 3 generations of a Catholic family into a family tree builder, because each generation contains about 20 children. And I started doing it on my mum's dad's side, entering all of the relatives from the report, and then I realized I'd made a mistake. Is I'd missed out 1 generation, like somewhere between great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, because the report, of course, my mum's great-grandfather would be my great-great-grandfather, and so that confused me a bit, and I accidentally missed out a generation. And then I discovered that there was no possible way to add in and insert a generation that you've missed. Is you had to delete everything and start again. And I lost it at that point. I'd maybe entered about, I don't know, 40 or 50, relatives, distant relatives. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. So I found the family tree builder didn't really do what I personally wanted to do. So this public family tree, I get that you can only add people, I think, if you've actually got a direct genetic link to them and they're also on 23andMe. But I'd like a personal family tree builder where I can include all of the family that I know I have through the ancestry reports that I've got. And that wasn't very easy, and that was a bit of a disappointment. But otherwise, it's all right. So it is an expensive thing to do, but for me, I enjoyed it. I just found it really entertaining, and I'm glad that I did it. So if you've done a 23andMe, let me know what you discovered. Let me know whether or not you thought it was worth the money, whether or not you learned anything useful or unexpected from it. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this, give it a like and consider subscribing.